Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason Booher. I'm on here from Kentucky, and I'm the current superintendent at a school system in Mercer County, a school system in central Kentucky, and right below Lexington, about an hour away from Louisville. But I appreciate you all having me on today, and to really just tell my testimony and how educators have impacted my life and allowed me to get to where I am today. Um, I made it to Kentucky via the Army. My dad was a medevac helicopter pilot in the Army, and he was in Vietnam for a year. And then after the war, his tour of duty there in Vietnam, he was stationed on an Army base in Germany. So he was 3 years there. And the last 6 months is when my mom and dad had me. So I was born actually on an Army base over in Germany. And so at 6 months old, uh, my dad got his next orders to transfer to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where all the gold is. And so at 6 months of age, I moved to Kentucky, and I've lived here ever since. And love Kentucky. And I started Parkway Elementary School. It was a first through fifth grade elementary school. So I started there in first grade. And I came to class that Monday morning, and I saw this kid next to me named Chad, and I recognized him from the bus, that the school bus that we had rode to school together. And and I looked over. I said, "Hey, I'm Jason. What was your name? I noticed you were on my bus coming to, but you got on the bus stop a couple blocks down the street from my house, but I hadn't recognized you from the neighborhood." And he said, "Well, I'm Chad, and my dad's military, and I just moved from Hawaii, an Army base in Hawaii, and just moved to Radcliffe, Kentucky, Fort Knox." And so me and Chad quickly became very best friends. He lived down the street from me, and he was like another brother to me. And again, first grade, the first day of first grade, me and Chad quickly became very best friends. So we went all the way through Parkway Elementary School through the fifth grade. We played on all the Little League teams together, football and soccer and basketball, and just loved anything competition wise. Went on to Radcliffe Middle School, which was a sixth through eighth middle school there right outside Fort Knox, and played sports there. And for one thing, for everyone to know is that in the state of Kentucky, every state, all other 49 states, boys basketball, girls basketball state championships have classes. I think in Illinois, you all have four classes. A lot of states have six classes, and that helps the little schools, small schools, be able to win a state championship. As you all know, the bigger the school, of course, the more players you have. But in Kentucky, the only state in the nation that only plays for one trophy, one state championship, regardless of size, whether it's a public or private school. The state of Kentucky plays for one trophy, and it's that trophy there sitting at the middle of Rupp Arena on that floor, huge trophy. And that's what everybody in Kentucky, of course, basketball is king here, and everybody plays for that. So when I got to middle school, my mom said, "Hey, there's two teams, one big city school from Louisville called Louisville Ballard, and Clay County, which is a larger mountain school from the mountains of Eastern Kentucky. These two teams are going to play in the state championship game at Freedom Hall, which is where the University of Louisville Cardinals played at the time. And they're playing for the state championship tonight. So it's the big city school in Louisville, and then Clay County, which is the mountains of Eastern Kentucky. And Louisville Ballard had Allen Houston, which later went on to play for the New York Knicks. And matter of fact, now today he's the vice president for the New York Knicks. And then Kentucky had a special star on their team and called Richie. His name was Richie Farmer. He went on to play for Rick Pitino at Kentucky, and his jersey's in the rafters today. So two superstars really, were playing. So my mom and I drove up to Louisville, about 30 minutes away from Fort Knox, and watched these two teams battle it out. And as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, Clay County won that big trophy that night of my seventh grade year, in March of my seventh grade year in 1987. And I walked out of Freedom Hall thinking, wow, I just watched two teams battle it out for the state championship in front of like 17 or 18,000 fans. That's something that I'd really like to do. Well, fast forward to my eighth grade year, 1 year later, my mom comes up to me in March and says, "Hey, Jason, the same two teams from last year that we watched, Louisville Ballard versus Clay County, are playing again. And now Allen Houston and Richie Farmer, their two superstars, are seniors this year. So they're playing again this year at Rupp Arena, which is where the University of Kentucky Wildcats play basketball. This year they're playing at Rupp Arena. So why don't me and you drive up there and watch these two teams battle it out?" Well, we went up there. The place was packed, over 20,000 fans. Richie Farmer goes off for Clay County for 51 points. But this year, Allen Houston and Louisville Ballard ended up beating Clay County to win the state championship. So when I walked out of Rupp Arena, that evening with my mom, I was like, that's exactly what I want to do when I get to North Hardin High School, which is where I was supposed to go to high school the following year. And I want to win a state championship, just like Louisville Ballard and Clay County did the last 2 years, just like Allen Houston and Richie Farmer did. I want to win a big state championship and celebrate as a player. So that was March of my eighth grade year. And you fast forward 2 months now to the 1st of May of my eighth grade year. And I went to school that Monday morning, and my little girlfriend at the time was named Cheryl. And Cheryl came up to me at school. We didn't go to the same church together, but she came up to me at school and said, "Hey, I went to youth group last night at my church, and we are going to take a end of the school year trip to Kings Island." Kings Island is a amusement park, much like Six Flags or all those that have those nice, really nice roller coasters and things. So she says, "What, you don't have to be a member of my church to go, which is great. So why don't you and Chad, my best friend from first grade now through all the way to the end of my eighth grade year, why don't you and Chad head it up and this trip up, get all of our classmates, our friends, our really good friends, our teammates from little league teams. Why don't you and Chad head it up, get all the parent permission forms signed, and then we'll go up to Kings Island and really just celebrate the end of our middle school years. We're about to go to summer break, which everybody's excited about that. And then obviously going to North Hardin High School, finally getting to go to high school and have all the fun there, and of course learn, but also try to win a state championship as a basketball player there at North Hardin High School. So that's what me and Chad did over the next 2 weeks till the middle of May. We got everybody signed up, all of our friends and people that we hung out with, got them all signed up, all the parent permission forms filled out. And then that day came, and it was a Saturday morning, much like today. It was like 75 and sunny, which is what it is here at Kentucky today, and not a cloud in the sky. And this was an older model bus at the time. Again, this was in 1988. This was a 1976 bus that the church, her church, Cheryl's church, had purchased it off a local school district at a surplus auction. So this bus that we are riding on to Kings Island had none of the safety features that all your buses in Illinois and all around the nation have today. And the reason why they have those safety features is because of the testimony I'm about to tell you all about. But we didn't care. Each bus has a legal limit of how many people they can put on a bus. This particular bus model, you could have 67 people on. And that's exactly how many we put on there. We put 63 teenagers, 4 chaperones. We were packed in there. It was so crowded that, you try to get 67 people on a bus like this. We're sitting 3 to a seat. Some people probably had 4. We had about 3 or 4 coolers out in the aisles that kids were sitting on. Matter of fact, the youth director of the church that sponsored the trip, of Cheryl's church, was sitting in the stairwell because there really wasn't room for him to sit anywhere else. But we could care less. We were going 3 hours up the interstate to Cincinnati to Kings Island to have a great time. So that's what we did. We packed in there, went up the interstate to 3 hours, made it to Kings Island. We rode all the fun roller coasters there. They have a lot of them there, and the Beast and the Vortex and the Racers and various roller coasters. And in the middle of May is the best time, I think, to go to amusement park because school's out in about a week or two. And so a lot of kids aren't there yet with their families. So that was a day where really no one was there, and we got to ride as many rides over and over and over without having to wait in line. And it was also really the first time in my life, 63 of us were turned loose by 4 chaperones. So we got to just go have fun without having to walk around with an adult all day. And I often tell people up to that point in my life, this was probably the funnest day of my life. And, the chaperones had told us earlier there's a big Eiffel Tower, and it's about the third of the size of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, France, right in the middle of Kings Island. You can see it from miles and miles away. But the chaperones had told us to meet at underneath the Eiffel Tower at 8 o'clock, and then we'll take a walk out to the parking lot, and then of course we got a 3 hour bus ride back home. And on that walk out to the parking lot that night at 8 o'clock from the Eiffel Tower, little did I know that the best day of my life up to that point, which I was 13 years old then, was quickly going to turn into the most tragic thing any 13-year-old could ever go through. See, we got on that interstate going back towards Louisville from Cincinnati on Interstate 71. We were heading down the interstate and it was getting dark. And the bus driver yelled back and said, "All right, kids, I'm getting low on fuel. So by law, when I get off at the next exit, you all have to get off the bus for me to fill it up." So he got off at the next exit and he said, "Go in there and use the restroom in the convenience store, use the restroom, get something to eat or drink. And then you can board it back up after I fill the bus up." Now, again, like I told you earlier, this was an older model bus. This was fueled by unleaded gas compared to today's buses, which are mostly diesel. Diesel is a lot less explosive than unleaded gas or fueled buses. So we went into the convenience store, used the restroom, got something to drink or eat, and then we boarded the bus back up. And when we boarded the bus back up, you can see where I was sitting, pointed there. I was about midways back, so I was the seventh row from the front against the window on the right side. Actually, you can see in red where the bus's gas tank was, right behind where you enter the bus each day. Of course, this bus had no safety features on it, like all of our buses do today. And when I mean that, like the gas tank, for instance, today's buses have to have cages around their gas tank. All the seats have to have flame retardant seat covers over top of them. They have to have pop out windows and side doors and pop out rooftops and in the back. If there's anybody on here my age or older, you all remember the back seats used to be full seats that covered up the emergency exit instead of what today's buses have, which are half seats in the back. So all the safety features that our buses have today did not have it on this particular bus. As a matter of fact, on this bus, the windows, it was an old bus. So the windows, you would try to push in the left side and the right side button, and maybe one would work and one wouldn't. And if you finally did get both of them working, then the window may go down on one side and stay up on the other, and it'd get messed up. So really, the windows, going out the windows wasn't an option back then like they are in today's school buses. So anyways, we boarded the bus back up, and we had about 2 hours left to get back home. And we got back on the interstate, and it was pitch black out there. It was 10 o'clock at night, and we're riding down the interstate heading towards Louisville from Cincinnati. And all of a sudden, I'm slammed in the seat in front of me. And before I got slammed in the seat in front of me, we were joke telling, storytelling, reminiscing about the day that we had, talked about our favorite roller coaster that we rode. And it went from, and the bus driver could care less how loud we were being. He was just glad a bunch of teenagers were having fun. So he let us be as loud as we wanted to. And again, we were having a lot of fun on the bus ride home. And then, like I said, all of a sudden I was slammed in the seat in front of me. And it went from loud on the bus to all the kids. It seemed like it went complete silence for about a second, maybe 2 seconds. And while I was gathering myself in that seat after hitting it in front of me, I'm looking straight ahead, kind of dazed, didn't know what was going on. And then all of a sudden, there was a huge explosion. Now, this is a daytime picture of an older bus. But all of a sudden, it was 10 o'clock at night and pitch black out there on the interstate. All of a sudden, there was a huge explosion up in the stairwell, up in the front right of the bus. And again, I was sitting over there on the right side of your picture against the window. And I saw this huge explosion in the stairwell, and then followed by a big ball of fire that came roaring down the outside of the bus right against my window from the front all the way to the back. Well, if you all remember, at the very beginning, I said the youth director of the church that sponsored the trip, Chuck Keita, he was sitting in the stairwell on the ride home. Well, that's where that huge explosion happened. So at 13 years old, I'm looking straight ahead on this school bus, seeing that big explosion, and Chuck Keita is immediately engulfed in flames. And he puts his hands out wide to his side, his left hand and his right hand out, and he just yells to the top of his lungs, "Lord, I'm coming home." And to witness something like that, as a teenager, it's indescribable, really. But I knew then something tragic obviously was happening. So, when we always grow up from kindergarten, first grade, all the way through our senior year, we always have to have 2 bus evacuation drills per year, every single year. One the first semester, usually at the beginning of school, and then one when second semester starts. Those are always nice, neat, orderly fashion bus evacuation drills. And the bus driver usually says, "All right, kids, it's bus evacuation day. Why don't you hop out?" Everybody go nice, neat, orderly fashion down the aisle, jump out the back, or maybe come out the front, and then I'll sign off on the form that I'm supposed to fill out, and I'll take it in and let the secretary or the principal sign off, and then we'll file that away until we have to do it again. And those are always nice, neat, orderly fashion bus evacuation drills. And I often ask everyone, you think about, have you ever opened up an oven door and felt what in your kitchen and felt like what 400 degrees feels like hitting you in the face? And could you imagine putting your hand in that oven at 400 degrees and touching the tops or sides of the oven? Well, think about what 400 degrees feels like in that oven. In 90 seconds, that's a minute and a half. In 90 seconds, this bus was over 1,500 degrees. So you can imagine how hot this bus got, that we were packed in with 67 of us on board. So it wasn't like these nice, neat, orderly fashion bus evacuation drills that we had done all the way from first grade now through the end of our 8th grade year. It was everybody trying to get out one exit, because remember, this was an older model bus. There was only 2 exits. The front door, which was already engulfed in flames, was not an option. So 67 of us had to get out that back door at the back of the bus. So it wasn't like I said earlier, those nice, neat, orderly fashion bus evacuation drills. It was everybody pushing and shoving, trying to get down that aisle, and trying to get to the back of the bus to get out of there. It was so hot so quickly on that bus that even the paint that's up on the ceiling, it started melting almost instantly and dripping down all the way back in the bus, and dripping on people and burning them, just the paint off the top off the ceiling of the bus. So instead of going down the aisle like I'd always been trained from first grade all the way through my 8th grade year, what I did is I stood on the back of my seat against the window, which is on the left side of that picture that you're seeing. And I took a couple steps on the back of those seats, and I got to the back of about 2 seats from the back there where you see the word emergency door. And I saw the kids, they were already piled up to about a foot left at the top of that door in the back. And the reason why they were piled up, again, 90 seconds, 1,500 degrees is how hot that bus was. But you remember earlier I said we took 3 or 4 coolers on this trip for ice water that was in bottled water, or drinks were in there. And we set them down in the coolers, and kids were sitting on them because it was so crowded on there. Well, today's buses, of course, it's against the law to have band instruments, book bags, any sport bags that you've got, coolers. You can't have any of those things in the aisles of buses anymore because of what you're about to hear. You see, we had 3 or 4 coolers in the aisles kids were sitting on. So all those kids in the front were pushing to get to the back, those kids standing up in the aisle, and they were getting tripped up on those coolers at their feet. And it was like a domino effect down that aisle there. So that's how, and then they just started climbing on top of each other as people fell down. And that's how those kids had gotten piled up almost to the top of that emergency door when I got back there to the back on the left-hand side. So what I saw like a 1 foot opening that I saw in the back, and I dove out that opening, and I landed on the asphalt below, and about where that red cooler you could see in on the interstate there. Now this interstate, we were going southbound towards Louisville from Cincinnati. You can see the truckers in the background. They were going northbound towards Cincinnati, In between the north and southbound lanes, there's about a 20-foot wide grass median strip. So I hit the asphalt there. Of course, the bus is engulfed in flames. There's smoke and flames and just heat coming from all sections of the bus. So those kids were piled up to the top of that door in the back, and they're yelling and screaming. You could imagine the screams and how hot, and they're getting burnt, and we're pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling kids, one right after another out of the bus as quickly as we could. And as we were pulling them out, these kids are severely burnt. It's not like the sunburns that we get when we, go to the beach or go to the pool or go to the lake in the summertime. These are third-degree burns that are through skin tissue down to the muscle, sometimes in some instances down to the bone. A lot of the cartilage, that's, ears, nose, eyelids. Of course, the hair was burnt off. A lot of that was burnt. So it wasn't like I said, it wasn't the sunburn burns. These were deep, deep burns that we were pulling these kids out. So as we pulled them out, we were taking them over to that grass median strip that separated the north and southbound lane and laying those burn victims out. The truckers, you can see there, of course, there's a red cooler in the picture. The truckers were bringing their coolers over to all those burn victims that were laid out in the grass, and they were dipping towels down in the coolers in the ice water, wringing those out and then laying it on all the burn victims. So I thought we had everybody out. So I could see only because of the smoke and the flames and everything. I could only see about 4, maybe 5 feet in the back of the bus there. And I thought, well, we got that area cleared. So that means everybody surely made it to the back. So I thought we had everybody out. So I ran over to the grass median, and of course, all these burn victims are all laid out there, and ambulances and police cars and helicopters and fire trucks were all coming in at that time, sirens and lights from galore. And I saw Cheryl, my little girlfriend at the time, was knelt down over the grass talking to somebody severely burned. It ended up being Christy, who was her cousin that was sitting behind us on the bus. And Christy was severely burned. And I mean, she was one of those that had a lot of the cartilage burn off, and of course all her hair was gone, and all her arms, both arms were completely burnt through the skin and tissue. And I didn't know if she was going to make it or not. But what I did is I knelt beside Cheryl, and I was giving her a motivational little talk. Come on, Christy, hang in there. Everything, just wait till the ambulance or the helicopters get here, and we'll get you to the hospital. Just hang in there. And about that time, I looked over my shoulder at the back of the bus, and somebody fell down late out of the bus. So I said, Cheryl, let's run over there and grab him and get him away from the bus. So we ran over there about where that red cooler is, and there was someone laying there. It ended up being a girl. I didn't know who it was at the time because of how burnt they were. But I said, Cheryl, you grab their feet and I'll grab their hands or wrist, and we'll get them away from the bus. Hurry, hurry. So I grabbed her wrist, and it ended up being a girl named Carrie Arntz. I grabbed Carrie's wrist, and Cheryl grabbed her feet. And I'll never forget it because she quickly dropped them. And I said, hurry, hurry, we're going to get burnt. We got to get away from the bus. And she said, Jason, you don't understand. Her legs are so hot that they burnt my hands trying to pick her up by her feet. So I cradled her in my arms, and I carried Carrie away. And when I laid her down next to all those other burn victims in the grass, I thought she was number 67. So all the burn victims ended up going to the hospital, and I went in an ambulance to we used 6 different hospitals just to house all the kids that got off. And when I got to the hospital, they were treating me for smoke inhalation. I was one of the lucky, I'll say 10 of the 67 that didn't have any burns. They just treated me for smoke inhalation, but I was fine. And this was not in the days of social media, so I didn't even know still why this big explosion happened and why this big ball of fire happened. And all these kids were burnt severely. I didn't even know what the story was or how we got to that point or why I was slammed in the seat in front of me. So that was Saturday night, late into Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. Well, then the news media started piecing it together. So about Sunday night, so about 24 hours later, the news media was reporting this. that this guy here named Larry Mahoney, he was a local high school dropout, dropped out of school when he was a sophomore. He worked at a factory near where the crash was in Carrollton, Kentucky. And he got off his factory job that night and went to a bar and had a few drinks. And I guess he didn't have any of his friends or buddies there that he usually drank with to socialize with. So he went to a second bar, had a few more drinks, and then I guess he didn't have anyone there to socialize with either as well. So he went to his best friend's house, which just lived down the street from where his house was. And he sat there with his best friend and drank for a little bit. And then he got up to leave. And his best friend ran over there to the coffee table and grabbed Larry's keys and said, "Hey, Larry, you're way too drunk to drive home. I know you just live a couple blocks, but I'll take you home. You can come back tomorrow morning and get your Toyota pickup truck, but I need to take you home tonight." Well, Larry looked that best friend back in the eye and said, "No, I promise you, I made it here. I made it here and I can make it home. I just live a few blocks down the street. And I promise you, I'm done drinking for the night and I'll just go home and just give me my keys back." So they went back and forth. And finally, that best friend allowed Larry Mahoney to convince him that he was good enough to drive home, sober enough to drive home. And Larry, instead of driving a couple blocks down the street and calling it a night, he got going on the exit ramp, going northbound in the southbound exit ramp. And miraculously, he was able to go 3 or 4 miles. The traffic was swerving around him, going head on against traffic. And then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 miles later on Interstate 71, hit our bus head on. You can see the path of his pickup truck on our school bus. It hit right there on the front left-hand corner, both of us going 60, 65 miles an hour. We were about halfway home at the time. You can see the little map from Cincinnati down to Louisville and Radcliffe. So he hits right there. Well, I told you earlier that the gas tank on a school bus is right behind where you enter the bus every day. Well, that's exactly where he hit. So, and we had just filled up with unleaded gas, which is highly explosive. So when he hit our bus head on, that newly filled gas tank, he hit right on that, and it splashed that new gas all the way down the side of the school bus. After that splash, that big ball of fire, that big explosion happened up in the stairwell, and then the big ball of fire came roaring down the outside of the school bus. So I finally figured out how this happened. And what happened was Larry Mahoney was drinking and driving that Saturday night, and he was going the wrong way on the interstate and hit our bus head on. So here's a picture of his brand new Toyota Tacoma pickup truck. I learned that Larry Mahoney, despite hitting our bus head on at 60, 65 miles an hour, both of us, that he survived this crash. And this is the famous picture of the Carrollton Bus Crash of our bus that night. The Louisville Courier-Journal took it, and each May, on the anniversary of May 14th each year, you'll see this in a lot of news media outlet around the nation, around the world really, of this bus and just talking about the anniversary of it. And then this picture is one, once they took it off-site to investigate it, I just see this color picture of our bus and I'm like, I don't know how anyone ever made it out of this bus. You can see all the plastic, of course, even the little school bus plastic sign on the outside was melted away. But it was an unbelievable time being, that 13 years old is such a fragile age as it is. But then it was an unbelievable time to learn that Larry Mahoney survived this bus. But when I laid down Carrie Arntz, she wasn't number 67. Matter of fact, when I laid down Carrie, she was only number 40 out of the school bus. So when you drive from Cincinnati to Louisville, regardless of which side of the interstate you're on now, you'll see this site of fatal bus crash, May 14, 1988. That night, I learned that it became the deadliest drinking and driving crash in our nation's history because 27 people didn't make it out of that fiery bus that night because of one person's decision to drink and drive. I also learned that 30 of the 40 people that did make it out were severely burnt. Carrie they were able to save one of her legs, but the last one out on the bus, Carrie Arntz. But the other one, when Cheryl went to pick her legs up, it was all the way burnt down to the bone, and they had to amputate one of her legs from the knee down. Many of the other survivors had to go through multiple skin graft surgeries to put, reconfigure and try to get ears, so they could sew ears back on and reconstruct noses, and go through skin grafts that they took skin off their legs and replanted it all over their shoulders and chest and back and arms, and just an unbelievable time in my life. But you know what about killed Jason Booher? About killed me at 13 years old. Not only learning that 27 of my very good friends that I grew up with, 3 of those were the chaperones, 24 kids. That about killed me as it was. But what about just put it over the top was when I learned that Chad, sitting in the same seat as me on the bus, he was the furthest one in the back that didn't make it out. Chad didn't make it out. My best friend from first grade all the way through my 8th grade year. That about killed Jason Booher at 13 years old at the end of my 8th grade year. Over the next week in Radcliffe, Kentucky, little small town, we had to have 27 funerals. Here were a pallbearer at 3 of my 8th grade friends. You can see the 3 hearse lined up on the right side of the screen. Unbelievable time in my life. One thing that went through my head when I got out of when I was trying to get out of the bus was this explosion, this fiery bus, this 1,500-degree bus in 90-second. It's going to take away my dream of ever winning a state championship as well. And it's crazy that went through my head, but that was one of the things I was thinking. And then, of course, I was thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this bus. So I was really blessed that I was able to get out of the bus. All the ones in black, the front of the bus is on the left. The back of the bus, of course, on the right. You can see Chad and his little girlfriend, April, at the time. They were the furthest 2 in the back that didn't make it out. April, it looks like 4 was in our seat, but actually April was sitting on one of those coolers I was talking about. And then Cheryl was able to make it out as well. Carrie Arntz, the last one out of the bus, she was the only one in the front row that was able to make it out. So here's where I was at. I was going into summer break, graduating from Radcliffe Middle School, about to attend the largest public high school in the state of Kentucky, North Hardin High School, with a rich athletic history, and especially boys basketball. But I was one of the 40 that survived. 27 didn't make it out, and it's the deadliest drinking and driving crash in our nation's history. And I really didn't know where to go from there because back then they didn't have the labels of at risk. But today I know in our schools, I know in Illinois and Kentucky and around the nation that we label kids at risk. And those are kids that the odds are stacked against them. Percentage wise, they're not supposed to make it just because of their upbringing, the tragedy, the adversity, the poverty, the abuse, and all the different stories that you could think of. They're not supposed to make it percentage wise because of their background. But you know what? I looked in the mirror at a young age and said, I'm not going to let Larry Mahoney and his decision to drink and drive, and where he killed 27 of my very good friends, including my best friend, I'm not going to let Larry Mahoney take away my goals and dreams. Nobody in my family had ever graduated from college before. So that was one of my goals and dreams as well. So I went on to North Hardin High School. We were able to make it to the state tournament, which is in Kentucky. It's called the Sweet 16 because there's 16 regions around the state. You have a champion out of each region, and then all 16 teams meet for the Sweet 16 at the state tournament at Rupp Arena in Lexington each year. So I was able to make it my sophomore year, but we got beat out the first round in the Sweet 16. My junior year, we had a really, really good team. We were in the top 3 or 4 of the whole state the entire year. We made it back to Rupp Arena and made it to the Sweet 16. We won the first game, so we're in the quarterfinals. There's only 8 teams left in all of the state of Kentucky playing for that big trophy that I showed you earlier. So we were really excited. I'm like, hey, maybe we're 3 games away from winning this thing, but we got upset in the quarterfinals by Covington Holy Cross from Northern Kentucky, and we got beat out. I was the only starter coming back. We had I was the only junior from that team. All other 4 starters were seniors. So my senior year, we didn't even make it back to the state tournament. And I graduated from North Hardin High School never winning a state championship, which I was crushed about that because I wanted to win that for Chad and the others that didn't make it out of the bus crash 4 years ago prior. And I was really crushed by that. So I went on to the University of Kentucky, and I went there because I was going to try to walk on for the men's basketball team with Rick Pitino. And I talked to their staff, and I realized there's a whole bunch of really good players out there, and they weren't taking any walk-ons the year I went there in 1996. But um, I'm sorry, 1992. Graduated there in 96. And my advisor said, Jason, what would you like to major in my first semester of my freshman year at University of Kentucky? And I told you earlier, my parents had never went to college before, or told me about what a major is or what you want to do. And it was the first time in my life that I didn't have sports in my life. I was so competitive. I just love, competition, winning, and I don't like losing. I feel like the end of the world comes when you get beaten anything, regardless of what you're competing in. So I really didn't know. So I had to ask the advisor, major, I don't know what I'd like to do. And I went home and thought about it for a little bit. And I came back and talked to her, and I said, you know what? I've decided what I want to major in. Those 4 years after the Carrollton bus crash, the teachers, the coaches, the administrators at North Hardin High School, the bus drivers, the counselors, the custodians, the cooks in the cafeteria, they all took care of me, Jason Booher. They took care of me after the bus crash. And like I said, they didn't pamper me, but what they did is they made sure, all of them made sure that I didn't fall through the cracks like the most at-risk kids. When the odds are stacked against them, they percentage wise fall through the cracks. They made sure that I didn't. They took care of Jason Booher. They challenged me. They pushed me. They motivated me. They made sure that I wasn't going to let Larry Mahoney take away my goals and dreams. One pact I made in high school or after the bus crash was I had never tasted alcohol or experimented with drugs in my life up to that point. And I said, you know what? If I had to bury my best friend and 26 others, I'm going to go through life and I'm going to try to have as much fun in life than anybody. And to this day, and I'm going to go to my grave and people will be able to say this one day about me, that guy, Jason Booher, had as much fun in life than anybody. And he's never tasted alcohol or experimented with drugs. So when I talk to young people, and I've talked to tens of thousands of people in assemblies and at churches and in schools and various settings, conferences, I often tell people, you got a guy in front of you that's had as much fun in life than anybody and never tasted alcohol or experimented with drugs. So there is someone out there. I know there's a lot of people out there like that, but there is one standing in front of you today that has much fun in life than anybody without that stuff. So I didn't know where I went from here. I told you I chose education because I wanted to give back to young people what those teachers, coaches, administrators, etc., gave back to me at North Hardin High School. So I told my advisor that's what I'd like to do. And then I also knew in the back of my mind that, hey, when I go into education, I can also be a basketball coach. And maybe I know I didn't get to win the state championship, as a player at North Hardin High School, but maybe I can do it as a head coach. And that's the ultimate dream in Kentucky, is to lead a team to the state tournament. So that's what I did. And 4 years later, I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, went on, and I went around the state of Kentucky, moved to 3 or 4 times until I ended up in a little small mountain school, a small Class A school. And I say Class A because in football, we do have classes. So we have 6 classes in football. So it was a little Class A school in the mountains of Eastern Kentucky and called Shelby Valley High School, which was in Pike County near Pikeville, Kentucky. So I ended up there, and we had a good little team in middle school, and they kept getting better and better. We went to the state tournament their freshman year and got beat out first round. We made it back and again, and we won another game. So then we got there in 2009, which a lot of them were juniors on that team. In Kentucky, because the small schools always complain, hey, we don't have any class system here, so it's hard. We're never going to win a state championship. Why don't we develop a month prior, like in February, because the Sweet 16 state tournament's played in March. While in February, we develop a little Class A, All A, we'll call it, a Class A state champion chip tournament that we can play. So at least the small schools have a chance of winning a state championship, although it's not the real one, the Sweet 16, we'll call it. I hate to say the real one, but it's a state championship, but it's just the small schools. So in 09, we were able to make it to the All A state tournament. And there's 16 teams there, and we were able to win the first game, the second game, the third game, and we got to the fourth game, and we were able to win this All A state championship in 2009. And I was able to buy a big shiny ring for everyone. And when I placed that on my finger, that just made me want to win the big one at Rupp Arena, the Sweet 16, that much more. So with this one, just made me even hungrier. Because I knew it was just the All A, although I don't want to take anything away from it because it is a state championship in Kentucky. And of course, it's just the small schools, private and public, the small schools. It's the smallest 125 schools in the state of Kentucky. So we had a lot of those kids on that team back the next year. So that team, well, let me back up. 1 month later, of course, that was in February when we won the All-A state championship in 2009. 1 month later, we made it to Rupp Arena and won our regional championship, played in the Sweet 16 at Rupp, and were able to win the first game, but then we got beat out again in the quarterfinals. So our dreams were dashed again about winning the Sweet 16. So fast forward 1 year, we get to February of 2010, and my little Shelby Valley Wildcats made it back to the All-A state tournament in February, and we were able to win the state championship again. And so now we could say we were back-to-back All-A state champions. And when I was walking off the court there at Eastern Kentucky University's arena, where the state tournament was played, I heard all the kids back in the locker room. They were jumping and yelling and dancing and singing, and I could hear all that commotion going on, just having a good time. But when I was walking back through the hallway, back to the locker room, I remembered that somebody, many people had told me that boys basketball in Kentucky, no one in history, no one had ever won the All-A state championship in February, and then 1 month later won the big one, the Sweet 16 at Rupp Arena, where all classes are involved in that tournament. I knew in the back of my mind that no team had ever done that. Just like the odds were stacked against me back in high school of ever making it past being an at-risk kid, I knew the odds were stacked against us of winning the All-A state championship that night, but then a month later going to Rupp Arena and winning 4 games and winning the Sweet 16. But I knew I was able to overcome adversity and tragedy at a young age. And just like this, although no one had ever done it, because most teams, when they win the All-A state championship in February, they're just celebrating the last month of the season. And they're just celebrating and really not focused in on trying to make it a state tournament. And plus, they're a small school, so it's hard to beat out the big schools in the region tournament, even to make it to the Sweet 16 to Rupp Arena. And then once the small schools make it to Rupp Arena in the Sweet 16, they usually get beat out the first round and never win a game at Rupp Arena because it's so hard for the small schools to win. But my little Shelby Valley Wildcats from the mountains of Eastern Kentucky were able a month later, we really didn't even celebrate the All-A state championship, our second one in 2010, because they said, we're going to go back to work in the gym for the next month. And we're going to try to, our legacy is going to be we're going to break history in Kentucky. And we're going to be the first team ever to win 2 state championships in 1 year. We're going to win the All-A in February. And then we're going to try to be the first ever to go ahead and win the big Sweet 16 at Rupp Arena. So we really didn't celebrate the All-A state championship in 2010. They went back to the gym and they worked extremely hard over the next month. We made it back to Rupp Arena, won the region championship. We won the first game at Rupp Arena. We won the second game. We won the third game, which is the semifinals. So that Saturday night on March 20th, 2010, we were playing in the state championship game. And I often say it's ironic because, at Rupp Arena, they turn all the lights out. There's over 20,000 people sitting there to watch us that night play. They line up all the players and all the coaches across the free throw line on one end, and then your opponent does the same thing on the other end of the basketball court across the free throw line. They turn all the lights off. They show this hype up video and which has a lot of the great plays from the state tournament those previous games that have been played over that last week. But then they also announce each one. And, they said head coach Jason Booher, and I stepped out. And when I step out on the floor in front of me from the free throw line, I'm like, I cannot believe this. We're a little small mountain schools of Eastern Kentucky playing us for the Sweet 16 state championship. And we're on the other end of the floor. Guess who we're playing? The big city school from Louisville Ballard. And it's the same school that I developed the dream or created the dream of mine to win the state championship back in my 7th and 8th grade years ago. And I'm like, we're playing this same team that I watched my 7th and 8th grade year in the state finals. So the little old small mountain school from Eastern Kentucky is never supposed to be able to play with the big city school, Louisville Ballard. And it's like a David versus Goliath. It's kind of like the movie Hoosiers, the Kentucky version, where the small school's not supposed to win. And, my little team from the mountains of Eastern Kentucky, they went to Rupp Arena and they battled Louisville Ballard that night. And at the end of the night, we were able to cut down the nets at Rupp Arena and win the Sweet 16 state championship and leave a legacy of being the only small school to ever win the All-A state championship in 2010. And then a month later, win the big one, the Sweet 16 at Rupp Arena. Here's my favorite family photo. This is my wife and 2 kids. Now Harrison, my son there, he's in medical school his 2nd year. And then my daughter, she's just graduated from Eastern Kentucky University, and she's a registered nurse. And my wife's an occupational therapist that worked in the school system for many years. So that's my favorite family photo. And then I want to show you this photo as well. This is that huge trophy that I showed you earlier that I dreamt of my whole life, really since I started watching high school basketball, but especially when I went my 7th and 8th grade year to watch Louisville Ballard and Clay County win the Sweet 16. All those players there, they came over there. This is mid-court, center court at Rupp Arena. And they said, hey, coach, why don't you lay a big kiss on this trophy right at half court? So I grabbed that thing, as you can see, and I laid the biggest kiss on that trophy, and everybody's going crazy. You can see the lady on the left back there just thought it was the neat, just so funny that me doing that. But my wife's not on this call, I don't believe, today, so I can tell you this. This is the sweetest kiss that Jason Booher has ever had right there at midcourt in front of all those fans, but which was, I'll never forget that kiss. But I don't show you this picture to tell you that. What I show you this picture to tell you is what was going through my head as I laid that big kiss on that trophy. You see, I laid that big kiss on that trophy, and I got tears coming down my face, and I'm thinking all the stuff that I had to go throughout my whole life. The bus crash, my parents getting a divorce, them losing everything financially, no one in my family ever going to college, all that at-risk stuff that was stacked, the odds were stacked against me, that I wasn't supposed to make it. All the stuff, bad stuff that I had to go through just to accomplish one of my goals and dreams was unbelievable. And that's what was going through my head when I laid a big kiss on that trophy. So that was one of my big goals and dreams. And I often ask people, what's your goals and dreams going to be? And after I accomplished that dream, I was like, what else can I dream about? How can I take this message on a world stage, not just in the United States, but on a world stage, about the consequences of drinking and driving, and really what impact the educators have had on my life after the bus crash was over, in that they made sure I didn't fall through the cracks. So I was like, hey, here's a good way to go take it on a world stage. I loved running. My son got me into it. He was a cross-country track runner. Matter of fact, he ran cross-country and track in college. And he got me into long-distance running, and I started running a half marathon. I ran another one, and I'm like, well, maybe just I'll do one marathon. Well, I ran one marathon, and then I got competitive, and I'm like, oh, I learned about times and trying to beat them and try to get into the Boston Marathon and trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And I'm like, oh, you know what? There's 27 people that didn't make it off the Carrollton Bus Crash that night. And a marathon is 26.2 miles. Well, that was just a coincidence, but a bigger coincidence is when I put each one of those kids and 3 chaperones in alphabetical order, I could dedicate, if I ran a marathon, I could dedicate each mile to one of those that didn't make it off. So mile one, Jennifer Arnett, mile two, Cindy Atherton, mile three, Sandy Brewer. And it was just a bigger coincidence that you go on down through there. And the last one, Chad, my best friend from first grade all the way through the bus crash, my end of my eighth grade year, Chad's last name was Witt. And in alphabetical order, he just so happened to come last. So when I'm running those marathons, that's although I feel like I'm about to die at the end of the marathon, that last point two, that sprint to the finish, I call it, that's my favorite part and my fastest part of every marathon that I run. So that's what I was able to do. Then I'm like, oh, there's 6 world majors. I can take this on a world stage and go around to the 6 world majors and have that as a goal and dream of mine. And I can run Berlin, London, Tokyo, Boston Marathon, New York City, and Chicago, and maybe spark a big news media covering on the consequences of drink and driving, the Carrollton Bus Crash. So that's what I did. It took me a few years to do it, and everywhere I went, all those 6 world majors, they were able to do a big news media pieces on me as I went and ran around the world to raise awareness for the consequence of drink and driving. And in 2024 of March of 2024, I was able to run Tokyo, which finished up my 6 star, and I was able to run all 6 world majors. I've run Boston now 3 times, which is a really good one, but Berlin was my favorite. I was born in Germany, like I told you earlier, and I really loved Berlin, but they were all really, really, you can see Tokyo in the background. Tokyo is a really great one too, great city. And that I accomplished one of my goals and dreams of doing that. So I tell you all that to tell you this today, really to wrap things up. I know we just have a few minutes left, but when I look back on my story, surviving the bus crash, the years of recovery, and even my journey coaching successful teams, I realized that the lessons I learned then are really the same lessons that matter in schools today. So let me leave you with these 5 takeaways to lead by. First, I say prioritize your health. You give so much. Every one of us educators give so much of ourselves to others, but you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of your physical and mental health so you can bring your best self to your students each day and still enjoy the life you've worked so hard to build. And I often tell people, don't build your life up and go through life, and then finally, hopefully, all of us can make it to retirement one day, and then your body's so broke down that you can't enjoy retirement. So prioritize your health each and every day throughout your career and enjoy a rich, fulfilling career. And then, of course, after you retire, you'll be able to enjoy retirement. Number 2, I say, wins fade, impact doesn't. The most important scoreboard isn't test scores or data sheets. It's the lives of your students years from now. They'll remember how you made them feel, how you believed in them, and how you helped them grow. That impact will outlast every short-term win. Number 3, this is a big one. See the student beyond the struggle. One of the greatest gifts I was ever given after the crash was those teachers and coaches and administrators that I told you about didn't just see the pain and scars. They saw my potential. They believed my story wasn't finished. Every single student you see this year has a story in your classrooms or in your schools, in your school districts. Some you'll know, and some stories you may never know, but every one of them is carrying battles you can't always see. So don't stop at their struggles. See the potential. Speak life into them. Remind them that their story isn't finished and that's where they are today is not where they have to stay. And I want to say that again. Where they are today is not where they have to stay. And you can make that happen with your students. Number 4, lift each other up. After the crash, I had moments when I couldn't carry the weight on my own shoulders, but it was my teammates, my teachers, coaches, and staff who lifted me up and kept me going. And I've seen the same truth in every great team I've ever coached. Championships don't come from talent alone. They come from teammates who refuse to let each other fail. This year, this school year, make sure be that kind of teammate for your colleagues Encourage the discouraged, share your wisdom, celebrate small wins. Resilient teams aren't built by individuals toughing it out. They're built when we carry each other forward. And then number 5, keep dreaming. I tell this to everybody that I speak to. Your past doesn't define your potential. Your age doesn't limit your future. And the same is true for your students. Keep dreaming for yourself, regardless of your age, and keep inspiring your students to dream bigger than their circumstances. So if you live out those 5 things, you won't just teach content, you'll change lives. So I wish you all the best of luck this school year. Hopefully that was an inspiring and story that you all enjoy and that you could take home with you. But again, I wish you all the best of luck. We've got the best jobs out there as educators, and keep pushing those kids, keep inspiring, keep motivating, and keep challenging to make it past all those circumstances that they may have stacked against them in life. Thank you all, and you all have a great day. And if you all have any questions quickly, we may just have a minute or 2 left, it looks like. But if you all have any questions at all, please feel free to put them in the chat.